Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get going. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 51, Area 51 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. Pursuant to motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, January 18th, 2022, committee is meeting to study or is meeting on the study of the federal government consulting contracts awarded to McKinsey & Co. I understand we have some online witnesses and that I can test that our clerk has completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. So thank you very much. We'll start with the opening statement from the Minister of, the President of the Treasury Board. Welcome back, Minister. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I am speaking from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. With me are senior officials from the Treasury Board of Canada, notably Roch Huppé, Controller General of Canada, and Catherine Luelo, Chief Information Officer of Canada. Monsieur le Président, les marchés de services.
Mr. Chairman, contracting for services is a common practice in governments and private organizations in Canada and around the world. Typically, these services are used to complement the work of Canada's own public service. Contracted services may be requested to provide specific expertise to deal with unexpected fluctuations in workload or even to provide an independent audit of a project.
On professional services as a percentage of total government expenditures have largely remained the same. Compared to spending on the public service, the use of professional services has also remained relatively consistent since 2011. Every year, there are hundreds of thousands of contracts for everything from pencils and vehicles to professional services. Given this volume, there are controls throughout government which start in departments and flow all the way up to Treasury Board, depending on value, complexity, and risk.
Fundamentally, these controls are established by the Treasury Board Directive on Managing Procurement. While the decision to acquire goods and services rests with each deputy minister, the directive sets out expectations and requirements to ensure that government procurement is fair, open, and transparent. Each department must have a senior official responsible for procurement, and this official establishes, implements, and maintains a framework of processes, systems, and controls.
Process and protect it from fraud. Define the intended outcomes, get the best value, including a fair price, and ensure what's delivered meets the quality, standards, and service levels in the contract. Departments are only authorized to enter into contracts up to specific thresholds. Any contracts that exceed them require Treasury Board approval. Departments and agencies publicly disclose contracts over $10,000. Actual expenditures are reported annually in public accounts. And we have a responsibility, which we take very seriously, to ensure spending remains prudent and delivers results. Accordingly, at the request of the Prime Minister, Minister Jacek and I are overseeing review of all procurements with McKinsey. TBS is requiring departments' internal audit teams to review their contracts with McKinsey to assess if the contracts complied with Treasury Board policy and departmental internal control frameworks. Now, TBS will review this assessment and undertake corrective actions if there are issues. And we are also requesting that Crown corporations, which are not subject to Treasury Board contracting requirements, conduct similar reviews. As an additional level of verification, we have asked the Procurement Ombudsman to provide a third-party assessment of compliance with contracting rules. Following these reviews, TBS will see if there are opportunities to enhance the directive on the management of procurement, for example, by providing guidance to departments to support procurement decisions. And we look forward to considering any recommendations coming from this committee, Mr. Chair. Les contrôles des marchés publics du
Canada's procurement controls are administered by dedicated public servants and have served governments of different stripes well. However, if improvements are needed, we will make them. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today on this issue.
Thank you, Minister. We'll start with Ms. Kusi for 6. But before we start, Colleagues, if we could just keep an eye on our clocks. I've been cutting off people a lot last few meetings. Thanks very much. Mrs. Goosey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, President of the Treasury Board, for joining us here again today. On what day did the Prime Minister approach you to investigate?
January 11th,
January 11th, okay.
2023.
2023. Thank you for that clarification. Are you aware of how much the government has awarded McKinsey and Company in contracts outside of PSPC?
Currently, if I can, I have the number here. I'm sorry. Value of contracts. 614 000? 114.
No, 14.4.
14.4 million.
14.4 million. Okay. When can we expect that your investigation will be complete?
As I sent out letters, and we sent out letters to ministers and also departments today, we are expecting to receive some information and complete by June 30th.
Okay.
To have a report by June 30th.
By June 30th. And you'll present the findings of your investigation to the committee?
If I am invited to, yes.
I'm quite confident you'll be invited. Are you familiar with the SNC Lavalin scandal that took place, I guess, 4 years ago now?
I was in government.
Okay. Are you familiar with the WE scandal that took place in government? I guess it would have been 3 years ago now, two and a half years ago now?
I was Member of Parliament of Ottawa-Vanier.
Okay. I guess what I'm getting at, President, is how do you think we can possibly trust a government who, I guess I'll also ask, are you aware of the ethical breaches of the Prime Minister?
As you are.
Okay. Are you aware of the most recent ethical breach of the Minister of Trade?
As you are.
Great. So what I'm saying, President, is I think it's very hard for us in the official opposition and very hard for Canadians to accept the legitimacy of a government that is investigating themselves, not only from the ethical standpoint, but also from the standpoint of the initial number that we heard was a double-digit number. Then we went into the hundreds, now hundreds of millions. Now we're at, last I heard, 116 million. So I'll ask you, Minister, how can we trust you to investigate yourself after so many ethical breaches from your government, as well as lack of clarity in regards to how much was spent on McKinsey and Company?
Well, first, thank you, everyone, for being here today. We do have a framework to manage procurement. We have laws, regulations, government-wide policies, directives, and guidelines. We also have department policies and guidelines. And if I may, I might share this chart with all members to see that we do have those mechanisms in place. And we continue to look into them, how we can strengthen them. Also, I have to say that in the past few weeks, we've had a chance to start looking into how we will address this. And we do have internal audit reviews that are done frequently, and I trust those will be given a chance to look at what we have done internally. We also know that the Ombudsman for Procurement will also have an opportunity to share his recommendations. And as we all voted for, the Auditor General will also examine if she wishes to look into this and review the contracts with McKinsey. And I welcome also the recommendations of the committee. I believe that Canadians expect our government
Minister.
to have
I think
strong procurement policies.
Laid out very clearly. Thank you very much. But I think the actions and the outcomes speak a lot louder than the chart that you've presented here today. President, are you familiar with the Purdue case with McKinsey, their implication in the opioid crisis in the U.S.?
I haven't been informed, yes.
Okay. Are you aware of the situation with the Saudi Arabian dissidents and McKinsey, how they feel endangered here in Canada as a result of the implications of McKinsey and Company?
I also have been informed, yes.
I'm wondering then how you, as the president of the Treasury Board and a representative of this government, can feel comfortable giving over $100 million to an organization which has been implicated in such a terrible lack of ethics and scandal, to the tune of an over 50-fold increase since the time that you have been in government, you and your government have been in place. How can you explain that, please, that you and your government align with such a company that lacks such ethics at such a grand scale, 50 times greater than the government previously?
Actually, I'd like to inform that under the previous government, an integrity regime was put into place, and we have continued to use this integrity regime, which is also making sure that we foster ethical business practices. And at this time, as you know, McKinsey is not deemed an eligible supplier under the integrity regime. And as you probably heard from Minister Jacek on Monday, PSPC administers this regime, and they are best placed to comment on the integrity regime.
Thank you, Chair.
As always,
Passing
right
the buck.
on 6 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kusmirchuk, over to you for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much, Madame President, for being here again at OGGO Committee and to provide your testimony and your insights on this important issue. Pouvez-vous détailler les...
Can you detail the contracts that McKinsey has received? Thank you, colleague, for your question. As you know, since 2015, McKinsey has received 34 contracts for a value of $116,000. And I can tell you that there were 3 competitive contracts for a total of $55.3 million, as well as some GBS plus analyses, as well. And there was, and it was almost 2 times less expensive by McKinsey than other bidders.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Has the government strengthened the transparency of these contracts? As I mentioned earlier, we are reviewing the mechanisms in place at the request of the Prime Minister. Minister Jacek and I are doing this work. We know that there are mechanisms, and we are providing additional information on the contracts. There is the proactive disclosure regime. We have 36 aspects that are analyzed, and we are adding to that because we want Canadians to know how our contracting is done. We want to ensure that we have proactive disclosure, and I certainly count on your work here to continue to improve the system we have.
Thank you for that response. L'examen des...
The review of the Kinsey contracts will be carried out by internal auditors. Are they really free to raise any problems they see? Could you just repeat that, please?
Oh, yes. L'examen des contrats de...
The review of the Kinsey contracts will be carried out by internal auditors. Are they really free to raise the problems that they might see? Thank you for that question. My hearing isn't the best today, so sorry for asking you to repeat yourself. As I said in my opening remarks, we have internal auditing teams, and the work will be done because they are independent and objective in their work. They will also work in compliance with the international standards for their profession. We also have the procurement ombudsman who will be making recommendations, and he is independent and neutral. So we are looking forward to his recommendations. As well, the Auditor General, if she wishes, might want to do a study and then provide recommendations.
What kind of expertise does outsourcing let the government access, in your opinion, that perhaps it might not have in-house or that I might be lacking? So where do you see outsourcing playing a strategic or critical role to make sure that we are providing vital services to Canadians, that we're delivering services to Canadians, and also making sure that we're supporting our public servants as well too in their role in delivering quality public service?
Well, thank you for that question. And as you know, we have a very ambitious agenda. Our government has a very hardworking public service. Sometimes we do need to complement that work to make sure that we deliver the programs and services we're bringing forward. And that complement of work of Canada's professional public service sometimes meet the unexpected fluctuations in workload. It's also to acquire special expertise. I know that Catherine Luelo has a lot to say when I meet with her to talk about our digital ambition and the talent that we're looking for. We have it inside our public service. We also need the expertise from the private sector, and I'm sure during the next hour she'll be able to share how IT is one where we're lacking and having a shortage of workers to help us move forward with our digital government. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for reminding me that 6 minutes is over already.
Thank you. Mrs. Vinola for 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Minister, thank you. Thank you to our other witnesses for being here. We have the public service, which is the employer of the public service. The public service comes under the Treasury Board. So we have had the suggestion by Dominic Barton last week that better training needs to be provided to the public service. He said, and these are not my thoughts, but he said that the public service is in the Stone Age. I think that we do agree, as he said, that we have a very strong public service. We have a lot of expertise. But for the work that we do, we need sometimes complementary types of expertise. We might need an architect, for example, to develop drawings and so on, so we can go outside to get that expertise. It's important to do that for professional services. We also have a long-term strategy for the public service. We have a lot of opportunities for training. Sometimes we do bring professional services out from outside, but we have the School of the Public Service that provides ongoing professional development to our employees to increase our skills and expertise. Thank you. The public service has to be a springboard for developing talent. People should even find it difficult. Rather, we should not have difficulty recruiting because people should see this as a very attractive workplace. We should be better than good. We should be an extremely attractive employer for people. Two contracts were provided to Kinsey to help with errors in Phoenix. But it seems to me the problem isn't really productivity on the part of the employees, but rather the system itself. Wouldn't it have been a lot more productive and cost efficient to get IBM or others involved rather than getting a consulting company to try to make the employees more productive? For example, if we have a running team with Andre Grass and say we should just run on a field that isn't any good. This is kind of what we're doing here, because if the system isn't working well, then why are we getting a consultant involved instead of getting IBM involved to fix the system? I am also a big fan of Bruno Surin and Andre de Grasse, so I do understand what you're saying. We do need to improve the situation with Phoenix, and I certainly can compliment those involved because we need to improve that. So we are working to streamline the processes, and I can tell you that the work that has been done has considerably improved and speeded up the work in all of the teams dealing with pay issues. And this enables employees to do better work. We certainly need to do that because that system wasn't working at all well. Yes, it is improving, and we are doing everything we can to provide employees with their pay properly. That's part of my main mandate. So if I understand correctly, you are satisfied with McKinsey's contracted services. We are satisfied with the work that they have done in the area that I mentioned to you to be able to help our public servants streamline the processes relating to Phoenix. And so we have been able to improve productivity by 14%, which helps us fulfill our mandate. Thank you. Well, very quickly now, what process do you use to make sure that the expertise needed is not already in-house? For example, if you are using comparative methodologies, how do you make sure that you don't have them in-house already? Well, as you can imagine, it's not really up to me personally. There are officials that analyze the situation and determine what skills are needed. So that would be how the contract was decided to be awarded. Thank you.
For 6 minutes, please. Minister, it's great to have you here. First, I mean, we're concerned, obviously, about the over-reliance on outsourcing, and it's because it so often fails to deliver value for money, and it also hurts the ability of the government to recruit the professionals it needs. I'm going to just do some quick yes or no's. These aren't complicated. The Treasury Board is responsible for approving regulations and supervising the quality of financial reporting in government. It's also responsible for government accountability and ethics. That's a fair assessment?
Yes.
Yeah. And the Treasury Board Secretariat makes recommendations to the Treasury Board on government regulations and spending, and it ensures that our tax dollars are spent productively. Is that a fair assessment?
Sorry. Yes, and you have to know that the policies direct the authorities that departments have, and it depends which department. So I don't want to generalize. Everybody has the same amount. So
your role is to ensure though, that it's spent productively. And now your role is to take the policies and programs approved by Cabinet, implement them, make sure departments have the resources they need to do their work, right?
my role is to set a policy to enable the departments to be able to do their work.
Yeah, and you've got guidelines. I mean, we put forward a motion also to the Auditor General, the NDP, as you know, to conduct a performance audit to ensure that your Treasury Board, guidelines, that the departments are developing credible cost estimates as well. That's something that you're aware of. Can you maybe speak about your homepage states some really important objectives, and I'll focus my questions on that today. Those are open government, innovation in the public service, and government-wide reporting on spending. Now, I'm sure you're well aware of the concerns we have. We've raised about the $600+ million consulting firms that are, literally it's a runaway train. They've gone from their share of outsourcing was $50 million in 2011. Now it's over $500 million. Just to point those out. But the impact on the public service is real. It's destroying morale, and it's erasing institutional capabilities. Now, I just want to highlight that the $15 billion in outsourcing, it's actually triple the promise you made yesterday, your government, on the health transfer. So this is significant. It's a lot of money. And the Prime Minister in 2015, he made an election promise to actually reduce outsourcing and the use of external consultants. These consultants, these 6 firms, it's gone up 4-fold since your government took power, doubled under the Conservatives. We know the impact this has on the morale. I guess my question to you is, under the current reliance on outsourcing, do you think it's ethical? Do you think it's a problem? Do you think it's best value for Canadians?
Well, first, I'm going to state that we are consistent with the size of the public servants service, and the amount of contracting that we do is the same as it was, or almost the same as it was in 2015. I think we have to make sure that we do focus on the fact that we have, as a government, a very ambitious agenda. We talk about housing, infrastructure, even mental health. And therefore, we have to make sure that we have the programs and services in place. And with the public service that we have, the hardworking public service, and the complement of working with professional services, this is how we can best deliver programs to Canadians.
I agree. Like, we have good professionals. They can do the job, but this is hurting morale. And I know Minister Jacek tried to dispute that, but I think that if you talk to the representatives of the workers, they'll tell you clearly this is having an impact. I mean, the Phoenix system, sole source contract that ended up costing hundreds of millions of dollars, started with the Conservatives, carried forward with your government. It's demoralized the public service. Outsourcing to companies like this means less transparency, lower accountability, and the loss of institutional knowledge. And also, problems arise with the over-reliance on this approach, the high cost and lack of competition. So we lose accountability, erode capacity, and hurt our ability to retain staff. Now, Mr. Barton, he called it the new phenomenon that's going on in consulting. And what the new phenomenon was, he says that these big consulting firms are spending records of amount of money on research and development because they're securing such big contracts, they're creating infrastructure on their own. Do you not see a problem with that?
Well, first, I will tell you again, outsourcing, when we started in government 2015 and the growth of the public servants to today, and according to what I've had a chance to discuss with my officials, we are investing the same percentage or consistent investment with service.
Minister, what's consistent is this increase, this runaway shift, like a 4-fold increase just to these expensive firms. It actually isn't consistent. It wasn't like that 20 years ago. It's becoming consistent. And this is one of the recommendations certainly the NDP is going to make, to stop the runaway train. This is hard for morale, but it's also a high cost to taxpayers. And it's not the same. It's not the same as 20 years ago. They're literally embedded now in government. We hear of consultants working side by side with public servants. And I guess my question to you is, are you going to stop the runaway train, or are you going to invest in public servants to do the job?
I am investing actually in public servants. I'm actually going to ask Catherine Luelo to share our IT ambition right now, which is a great example of how we have to make sure that our IT is serving Canadians appropriately, and how we are working with the public service and also strengthening the training and the expertise. Please, Catherine, go ahead.
I'm afraid we're not going to have time for that, perhaps
Okay.
on another round. Mr. Paul Hoos, again, welcome back to your natural home at OGGO for 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Minister and witnesses. As you know, Minister, we looked at the period from 2011 to 2021. We had a few, certainly had contracts up to 2013, nothing between 2013 and 2015, and then there was an explosion of contracts with McKinsey. So was there any kind of directive from the Prime Minister to deal with McKinsey? No. We deal with officials to get them to identify their needs, and then they work to see which firms would be appropriate. Are you talking about in Cabinet? No, I'm talking about the directive on managing procurement, and the rules enable me. So, Minister, so in 2014, 2015, we didn't have contracts. And then after your government was elected, we had a huge explosion starting in 2015, 16, and then up to 2021. So was there some kind of a directive to work with McKinsey? We have the directive for managing procurement that governs how we award contracts. Well, who encouraged people to deal with McKinsey? McKinsey bids on competitive contracts that are offered. I could perhaps ask Roch to talk about sole source contracts, but even those follow the proper steps to be awarded. So the directive for managing procurement comes under the various departments. Well, you are aware that there was a case that was started in 2021, and because that was the year when the most contracts were awarded to McKinsey. McKinsey paid a $600,000 fine for infractions. So when the government was made aware that there were problems with judgment, why did the government continue to hire McKinsey? Well, as you know, we have an integrity regime that was established in 2015 by the previous government, and we followed the integrity rules. But in fact, we knew publicly that McKinsey was involved in things that it shouldn't have been, and nobody in government has identified this as a problem. Well, when the integrity regime was brought in, when any consulting company has been convicted within the past 3 years, then the policy says that they are out of the running for 10 years. So that comes under the integrity regime, and I think that Minister Jacek shared with you that because this comes under her. So are you saying that we're talking about the public accounts and money that is going from the government of Canada to McKinsey? Does that mean that there is no active contract with McKinsey because of the assessment made? I don't really understand the question. Well, you talked about that there is a system for evaluating the directive on managing procurement, but now it's 2023. We know there's been a problem. We've known for 3 years. So 2 years later, is McKinsey still able to have contracts awarded by the government? Right now, the directive on managing procurement indicates clearly how contracting should be done. That's not my question, Minister. Does McKinsey have contracts? It does still have the ability to get contracts. It is eligible. Do you think that that is reasonable? Should we still be dealing with McKinsey? I think that we cannot consider them not to be eligible. Do you think that McKinsey should be excluded? Well, in fact, it is not right now eligible. We have the regime. We follow the integrity regime for these things.
Bruce, thank you, Minister. Mrs. Thompson for 5, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister. Actually, I'm going to circle back to Ms. Luelo to answer the previous question on IT as a significant portion of federal outsourcing, and why is that, and also why isn't the work done internally?
Thank you for the question. I think I've had a chance to present at OGGO before. Just a reminder, I'm 18 months into government, so again, still prefacing some of my comments with that backdrop. And I think it's relevant in the sense that what we're experiencing inside government with IT outsourcing is a very normal practice from my background working for large Canadian organizations. We are taking advantage of outsourcing because we have a 30% vacancy rate in our digital cadre of employees. So on a baseline of about 28,000 positions, we have difficulty staffing those roles. And that's not just a government phenomena. That is a Canadian phenomena right now. There is a significant talent pool gap in Canada. And so all organizations are competing for the same employee base. And that becomes very competitive as you get more experienced resources. We have stood up within the Office of the Chief Information Officer, a digital talent group in spring of last year to absolutely take advantage of bringing more people into the public service. I would share with this committee that we did a job posting for cybersecurity experts across Canada just a number of weeks ago. We got 1,600 applicants, and we're just working through those right now. One of the challenges that we have is the length of onboarding, to be completely direct, and that's something that we are working on with our OGGO colleagues. It's difficult to, when you're looking for talent in a very hot market, to take upwards of 100 to 200 days to bring them in. They'll get scooped up by 4 additional offers by the time you do that. So that is on our radar screen. But the public service that is currently delivering IT would like nothing more than to have more colleagues. We are challenged in finding them in the Canadian marketplace right now. And it is difficult to bring people in from other jurisdictions because of some of the security requirements we have specifically related to those working on our technology.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation. And I'm going to stay with the officials for the next question, which is on specific to the safeguards that exist in procurement process to ensure it's fair, open, and transparent. Could you speak about that and what external checks are in place within the system? The people involved in the procurement process, what people are involved, is it from start to finish? So is there a continuity in that process? And then if you could speak to the transparency, so really in depth around how we maintain the integrity of the process.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It's a great question. I'll start off by saying as a premise that the procurement processes is probably one of the activities in the government today where we have a set of processes and controls that are what I would consider very mature. And so we have, a very impressive control framework around these activities that start and include stuff like, I'll call it documentation, so legislation, regulation, or policies, very detailed supply manuals that are available to everyone and made public by that and available in a very transparent fashion. We have a very professional workforce in the procurement community that is governed by a learning curriculum where they have mandatory training that they need to go through. Also, training is also mandatory for managers. that manage these contracts, that are the client of these contracts, to make sure that the work gets performed and so on, and their accountability in that process. I have to say the controls are based also on a premise of delegation. So everyone's got an accountability and in the process, and it varies. So in departments, for example, there are delegation instruments that exist which will prescribe who has the authority to approve which types of contract, competitive, non-competitive, different types of goods, and so on and so on. From a disclosure perspective, and the Minister alluded to it, we have the proactive disclosure whereby all contracts need to be disclosed that are over $10,000. The Minister also indicated that we're piloting new sets of information that needs to be disclosed.
I'm afraid I have to cut you off there, Mr. Houpe. Our time is up. But perhaps, yes, I realize, perhaps the next round. Mrs. Vinola for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci. Thank you very much. Ms. Fortier, the French Senate in a report indicated that it was important to make a distinction that was prepared by the government or prepared by McKinsey. Is it the case in Canada? Is there a distinction between those two? I can't tell you directly. I know that a department that has contracted out certainly ensures the quality of work done by outside contractors, and there are clauses in the contract that require certain criteria to be met. You at Treasury Board are responsible for a number of policies and regulations. We were told, and I think you confirmed this in one of your answers in question period, that the process for contracting out is quite long and complicated. So is there a way of making the process more streamlined, but certainly keeping the safeguards in? Well, to begin with, those who work with the current policies are always looking at the process through a lens of ensuring integrity. And we certainly are here open to your ideas for improving the process. We have rigorous controls under the Directive for Managing Procurement and the other tools that we have so that we can move forward with government work. I have a very quick question. Have you read the initiative? I would really invite you to read that initiative that we would be discussing in question period.
Thank you. Mr. Johns for 2.5.
Mr. Accenture got, $5 million worth of contracts in 2011, just over that. 2015, 15 million, tripled under the Conservatives. Went up to 55 million in 2021. Deloitte went from 28 million to 173 million in a decade. Ernst & Young, 5 million to 28. KPMG, 4 million to 34 million. McKinsey, 642,000 to 32 million. PricewaterhouseCoopers, 9 million, went up 452% under the Conservatives, and then doubled under your government to 93 million. Do you think this is normal?
Well, again, I mentioned it earlier, and I'm going to repeat it. Over the past decade, the percentage of government expenditures for professional services has remained relatively consistent with the size of the public service. And with our ambitious agenda, we have been working very hard to make sure we develop
I would say the ambitious agenda of these 6 companies, they've been working really hard because it's gone up tenfold in 10 years. And I just want to highlight that. And I'm going to get to Ms. Luello, because Ms. Luello, you're talking about hiring new workers, so important, and the challenge that you've raised. And I guess my question to the minister is, we consider expanding the budgets of these units that need help, especially the Canadian Digital Service, so that more of this IT work can be done in-house and the results can be owned by the public.
Again, for the IT initiative, I'm going to let Catherine share why we are working as much with external services than our public servants who are making sure that we're bringing forward our digital
I think she
transformation.
explained why, because of the challenge. But I guess my question is, will you fund to meet the challenge so that it's in-house?
We are, go ahead, maybe explain how it is.
We I think, can execute on the resources. The resources don't exist, and we can't bring them in fast enough. That's the issue we need to solve. So I'm not convinced it's a matter of moving money to fund more positions. That's likely part of it. But I think it's really important to note we are operating in a technical environment in the government that if you've been around for 40 years, you're part of the fact that we have an aging technology environment.
So, Ms. Luello, I get it. Like, they're really difficult to find these talented people, but what are we going to do to recruit them is I guess, I want to understand what the plan is, because right now you're still getting the work done. You're using expensive consultants. Some of them are outsourcing sub-consultants, and they're making money by actually hiring the sub-consultants that aren't even tech people, as we saw with GC Strategies. Like, this is just unbelievable, right?
I'm afraid that is our time. Perhaps if you have an answer, you could provide it in writing to the committee. Mr. Johns, thanks. Mrs. Cusi, over to you for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. President, as I'm sure you're well aware, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada received a $24.8 million contract to manage and execute the IRCC Service Transformation Strategy. This contract, it concluded in December of 2021. Yet here, in January of 2023, we still have a 1.2 million backlog in immigration applications. How can you justify that Treasury Board, how do you explain that Treasury Board keeps getting bad value for money when we're getting outcomes such as this? Based upon such a significant investment in McKinsey and Company, how can you justify the terrible outcomes that your organization is receiving for this massive amount of money?
Well, first, I want to come back to the fact that the department identified needs to continue the work on.
But you released the money.
There is a policy on procurement, management of procurement. The officials identified needs to make sure that they can deliver on the ambitious agenda there is for immigration. Therefore, the department went through the process, the procurement process, and that's how let's say, requirement definition that I identified, then they did the planning, then they did the tendering, evaluation, and contract management is being done by the department. I would encourage that that current question that you have be asked to Minister Fraser and his department for the delivery of the mandate.
No, I appreciate that. And I certainly would also be interested in asking Minister Fraser what he thought about the outbursts that we saw in the House of Commons earlier today from that distraught individual who's just clearly beside himself about his family in Afghanistan as a result of the failure of your government. I'd actually be very interested in asking Minister Fraser about that as well, President. President, the work being provided by McKinsey for federal departments has been described as generic, vapid, not realistic by sources reported in the media. So what role has your organization played in ensuring these contracts provided add value to the public service?
Well, again, thank you for the question, and I might ask my official to complement the beginning of the answer I'll give. We do have a very rigorous procurement process. The policy and directive that the Treasury Board determines gives the departments the opportunity to go through that process. Therefore, we have a strong directive. We will, of course, with the review, see if there's a way to strengthen it. I might ask my official if he wants to add anything to complement the question.
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, we have a decentralized model and there's different accountability. So the business owner, the owner of the contract, has the accountability to manage the contract, to make sure that the services that they are receiving is actually in line and of quality that is outlined in the contracts. And we have, for example, before any payment can go out, the responsible manager for the contract needs to validate that information. And the financial officers releasing the money in those departments have controls in place to ensure that what we call Section 34 being done by the manager is actually being done with due diligence. So again, there's processes to validate that. And if there's a performance issue, it needs to be documented. Again, there we have processes to deal because we run into situations where there will be performance issues with some vendors, and there's also processes that are utilized to address these performance issues.
Thank you. I do recall Section 34, signing for that in my time in the public service, so you're taking me back here. President, the contract with McKinsey to transform the department, IRCC, cost taxpayers over $27,000 per day. In your opinion, how is this work more affordable than expending the capacity of the public service itself to do this work?
Again, I would ask if you could send the question to the officials from the department who contracted McKinsey to do the work. I understand that there is a lot of public servants working in the department, and it complements the work that they need to do to deliver the service programs and services, but it would be best to ask the department as they contracted with McKinsey.
But it's up to the Treasury Board to determine when outside consulting services are used. So how have you been ensuring that none of the over $100 million awarded to McKinsey could not have been conducted internally?
Very brief answer, please.
Again, there's a procurement process, and each department has a threshold they can identify. There's a threshold that is identified for them to work with, and in this case, IRCC and the officials went through that procurement process.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Baines. Over to you, please, for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for joining us today and your staff. When it comes to consulting contracts, what measures are in place to prevent a conflict of interest?
Well, thank you. Nice to see you online. As you probably know, and we've shared a couple of times already, there's multiple layers of policies and controls in place to really ensure that conflicts of interest do not occur within the public service. And it's ranging from the values and ethics code and also the directive on conflict of interest. You know also that ministers, parliamentary secretaries, political staff, and other reporting public office holders are governed under the Conflict of Interest Act to ensure that conflicts do not occur in procurement or other policy making areas. Therefore, this is how we have those measures in place.
Okay, and do you have reason to believe anything was done incorrectly by awarding those contracts from a procurement process perspective?
Thank you for the question. We currently have no reason to believe anything was done incorrectly by the awarding of these contracts from the perspective of our current procurement processes that I've shared with you this afternoon, which are rigorously followed by public servants. And as you know, Minister Jacek and myself are currently conducting a review to ensure that all policies are followed adequately and what, if any, changes need to be made to strengthen the procurement framework. And again, I welcome the committee to share their recommendations so we can continue to strengthen that policy or framework.
Okay,
Thank you.
And with respect to McKinsey, when the government contracts with McKinsey, what measures are in place to ensure that government information is not shared with other organizations that contract with McKinsey?
I will ask the official to answer specifically to your question. Look.
So basically, the information that these suppliers have access to is based on a need to know, and there's usually clauses in the contract that define the use of the information. that it would be permitted. So again, that information is protected. There's different set of rules under the Access to Information Act also that would come into play. So there are mechanisms that are used to ensure that the information is protected.
Maybe I would just add comments. We do complete privacy impact assessments for programs that occur within government. That is a overarching, anybody that has their hands or fingers on a specific program would be part of that review, and that is typically done at the front end and of a program. So just to complement Rock's answer.
Okay, and just to stay with the Secretariat officials here, who defines the bid requirements for proposals that are published by the government?
The business owner will define the requirements that is needed. So the managers themselves, when they decide that they need, external assistance for the reasons that they do, will decide as to exactly what they're looking for from a service. So they will define the actual bid requirements usually.
And then what safeguards are in place to ensure that these requirements are created in a fair, open, transparent fashion?
Well, again, so there's different ways, right, that you could define the bid requirements. If you're not exactly for certain, you may not be, you may not exactly know exactly what's out there. You know what you need. So there's industry days that you could conduct in an open and fair, transparent, which you will tap into that knowledge to see what exists out there, what kind of services could you be receiving. There's requests for information that departments can use, again, in a very open and transparent way to help them define exactly what they're looking for, to ensure that they're going to get the most value in the outcome of the contract.
And if I could sneak this in, who evaluates each bid to ensure it matches the bid requirements and provides the best value for money?
Thank you for that question. A senior official is identified per department to undertake that evaluation. So every department identifies that senior official.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Baines. I'm afraid that's it. Mr. Genuis, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Minister, I want to confirm that you said your report on McKinsey procurement will be made public by June 30th. Is that correct?
If I'm asked to present it publicly, I will. Our officials and I have sent out a letter to the departments to send.
Sorry, Minister, I know the particulars of the review. So
I would just like to explain the process if it's possible.
You've already explained it. Will you be making this public, or you still haven't determined yet if you're going to make it public?
Well, I think in this case, because we want to make sure that we are transparent, we will be making this public.
Okay, so the report will be public before
Yes.
June 30th.
Not before June 30th. We are engaging to have a report done by June 30th. As you know, we're asking departments to send us
Okay,
currently.
it'll be done by June 30th, and it'll be made public at some point after
We are expecting to be done
that.
by June 30th, and
Okay.
I'm hopeful to be able to make it public as soon as possible.
Okay.
After we have done the report.
Okay. Would you call your review an independent review?
We will be doing the review as asked by the Prime Minister.
Yeah. Would you describe it as an independent review, though?
Yes, I have independent auditors in the different departments, and
Okay,
as I said earlier,
you hold the pen ultimately on the report, or will the auditors hold the pen on the report?
the department will be holding the pen on the report.
Okay, so they'll prepare the report, they'll release the report. There won't be any political involvement in the contents of the report, or there will be?
Well, as you know, I've been tasked by the Prime Minister, so I think that it will be a shared responsibility where we will be making sure that we go through the department.
Will you share the contents of the report with the Prime Minister in his office prior to it being released publicly?
I have not decided how I'm going to go through it, but I can tell you that the report will be done accordingly to the review we are undertaking with the different departments. And we've also asked the ministers to ask the Crown
Minister,
to
if
do the
you were
same.
to conclude that ministers or the Prime Minister had engaged in wrongdoing, do you think you would remain in Cabinet after coming to those conclusions and making them public?
I am very proud of this mandate that I've received from the Prime Minister to make sure that we have the right procurement process
Right.
in place. I am welcoming also the procurement ombudsman to send his recommendations and report.
Yeah.
And
Minister, I
also
don't think you're answering the question, and I
encourage
also
the
don't. I think it's pretty
Auditor
clear that it's not an
General,
independent
if she
report.
wishes to do so,
yeah.
to
The
bring
Auditor
her
General's report will be
recommendations.
independent, and that's why
And
Conservatives
also,
called
I'd
for
like,
it.
and as chair, I've shared during my opening remarks and throughout this meeting, I have informed the committee that I will welcome the recommendations
Thank you.
from the committee.
Okay, thank you, Minister. I want to go in a different direction now. I think it's pretty clear that there's nothing independent about the review you're doing. But I'll let the public judge that based on the exchange. Do you think that McKinsey is an ethical company?
I don't have to evaluate McKinsey at this time. As the president of the Treasury
But
Board, I do need to have a procurement process in place, which the department
Minister, I want to press you on
presents.
answering this specific question, though, because McKinsey's been involved in some really incredible practices around the world and here in Canada. And all of us have responsibilities as human beings to evaluate those things, regardless of the office we hold. Do you believe, based on what you know, that McKinsey is an ethical company?
I would like to remind Canadians that are watching right now that in 2015, the previous government brought
Minister,
forward
could you answer the question?
I am responding to
Do you
your
think that
question.
McKinsey is an ethical company?
I believe we have an integrity regime
Excuse me,
that
Minister.
gives us the
Minister, we have a
opportunity.
point of order. Go ahead,
I
sir.
appreciate our colleague. It's fair to ask the minister a question and hold the minister and the government accountable, but I really appreciate if a colleague allowed the minister at least start the response to a question. Thank you.
Just on the point of order, what a farce. I controlled this time. I asked the minister a
Let me,
direct yes or no question. She didn't answer it, and now her colleagues are trying to jump in order to provide cover and buy time. It's a pretty basic question, and the minister doesn't have a right to go off on completely unrelated tangents when I ask a specific question.
Let me
So,
just
Mr.
interject quickly. I have stopped the clock, but it is not a point of order. It is the member's time, and whether yourself or any other party wishes to maintain their time, that is their right. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, it's a yes or no question. Is McKinsey an ethical company in your view?
My answer sticks to the fact that in 2015, the previous government brought forward an integrity regime, and I believe that gives us the tool to make sure that we have businesses that can function.
Right,
with,
But let's assess the company, and then that will help us understand if the integrity regime is working properly or not. Because
My
it's not just about whether it
responsibility
fits
as
within the rules;
president
it's
of
about
the
objectively. Put aside the legalese, Minister. In your view, this company, are they an ethical company?
As the president of the Treasury Board, I bring forward the directive on procurement.
As a human
management.
being, do you think the company that advised Purdue Pharma on how to turbocharge the opioid crisis is an ethical company or not?
As
As a
the
human being, do you believe that?
As the president of the Treasury Board, I have the responsibility to have the right and rigorous procurement processes in place for the government
Why
of
can't you just
Canada.
say yes or no? If you think they are an ethical company, then say yes. If you think they're not, say no. Is McKinsey an ethical company?
As I am answering the question, my answer is the fact that as president of the Treasury Board, I am responsible for the procurement process.
Did you
and
say
the
yes or no,
directive.
Minister? Are they an ethical company? Yes or no?
I've answered by saying we have since
I
2015.
think on
Yes
that I
or
have
no?
to end your time here. Mr. Jouari, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for the level of professionalism as well as your officials. Minister, for the past hour, all the colleagues have been focusing on getting understanding of the policies and the scope of the work that the Treasury Department does and is under your leadership. We've talked about the safeguards. We've talked about outsourcing. We've talked about the strategic direction that the government has taken. And a number of colleagues has talked about that how the outsourcing has increased, and they're referring back to 2011 and 2002, 2020, 22. I had an opportunity to look at these numbers, and I'd like to share what I see, and I'd like to have your thoughts and your official thoughts on that. So I see between 2011 to 2013, the year of starting some of the cuts and austerity measures, especially around essential services with the previous government. 13 to 14, the previous government was getting ready for an election, and they had hoped for a balanced budget that didn't happen. Between 2016 to 2019, probably, I would see our government coming in with transformative years around some of the policies, and specifically around digital government. This is something that was the mandate of the Treasury. And during 2020 to 2022, we had to change our role from a transformative into a more supportive role. And if you look at some of the cuts in the civil servant during the years of 2011 to 2015, this is very much indicative of the austerity measures that the previous government brought. So you've explained everything, but one of the things that I believe that we could get some insight to is what had changed between 2011 to 2020 that required that type of resourcing supplement from external consultants.
Well, thank you for your important question. I will say that since we formed government, we've had a very ambitious agenda. First, to protect the social safety net, make sure that we have programs that support Canadians, all Canadians. And we also needed to continue to transform, and I might let Catherine Luelo share the digital transformation that we are now today pushing forward to and working with the public service. But I will say that that's what we've been doing since 2015, making sure that we bring to Canadians some programs and services that will help grow the economy, make sure that they have good jobs. And one thing, though, that is on my mind all the time since I've had this mandate is our digital the transformation of our digital government. And that is something that is a priority. I also have it in my mandate letter. I'm making sure that we are moving forward. The thing is, we need outsourcing and we need the public service to complement each other to make sure that we push that agenda, that digital ambition agenda that we have. We need more and it will take some time, but we do have many important projects going on. And I'll let Catherine maybe share the three major ones that we have right now.
Thank you, Minister. To your point, the digital ambition really outlines the plan for government. It's available publicly on canada.ca. That will allow us to deliver government in a digital age. And Canadians have come to expect that, particularly during COVID. That is accelerated. That's not changing. The challenge is, we've got systems like old age security that should be on old age security. So a big component of this plan is dealing with the technical debt situation that we have in the government. And to the minister's point, we have the program within our Economic and Social Development team, ESTC, that is replacing our old age security, CPP, and EI systems. That is a complex multi-year.
I'm going to apologize for interrupting you. I only got 15 seconds. So is it fair to say we are accelerating because we need to also accelerate the services that we're providing to the Canadian?
Digital is all about service. That's an accurate statement.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Vinola for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci. Thank you very much. Minister, has McKinsey come to you to ask for contracts or to any of your senior officials? Not in my ministerial team or to me. Perhaps, Catherine, you would like to share something, whether you've had conversations with McKinsey?
Discussions with McKinsey, simply in my involvement in the Canadian ecosystem. McKinsey is a vendor that I dealt with in my private sector. And so I had one conversation when I started and was part of the Phoenix discussion with McKinsey when they presented their outcomes.
And you initiated those discussions, or did they?
The discussion related to Phoenix, I was invited to. The discussion with them when I first started was an email exchange. Very well could have been initiated by me, but I reached out to all of the partners that I'd worked with within the Canada marketplace.
When invitations like that are sent out, do you have the reflect to look at the lobbying list?
My office typically does that. Apologies. My office does that check.
Okay. Madame la Présidente,
Minister, are there policies or objectives or strategies that have been created or revised as a result of the recommendations from McKinsey? If you're talking about Treasury Board, no, that's not the case. But in general, across government, I don't look at what is done in other departments, all the efforts that McKinsey might make there in providing services and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johns for 2.5, please.
Thank you. We know consultants' job is to make sure they got work and they're going to create jobs for themselves in the future. The public service is there to hold truth to power. It's important. Now, one of the consequences of outsourcing that's been brought up by other experts in their testimony at this committee is the profit margins that these consultants make. And the result is Canadians paying more for services than less. Has the Treasury Board or the Secretariat made any attempts to calculate or estimate the total value lost due to outsourcing contracts? And if so, what was the amount reached? And I guess I'm specifically talking about the profit margin consultants take and the fees charged by middlemen who subcontract the responsibilities away.
Again, I may bring you back to the fact that the deputy ministers are responsible to ensure the careful, responsible stewardship of public funds, and that the departments have the tools to assess the performance of the contracts. Also, as you probably know, the lowest price is not always the best value into the procurement. So it's important that it's defined.
Okay.
It's important for you to know that it is through the.
I don't think that answer gives
ministers.
a lot of confidence, given what's going on with the amount of subcontracting. We've seen example after example. I'm concerned that the Prime Minister's commitment in 2015 has totally fallen off the chart. That both you and Minister Jacek feel confident about the course that you're taking. That the morale of the public service is fine. That's not what we're hearing. Now, the public service, we know, is mired in excessive rules and oversight, which makes it difficult for public servants to move quickly and to be innovative. This is part of a government obsession with risk aversion, and it makes it incredibly difficult to do anything at all. A public servant in 2021 needed to produce 45 different documents, almost 40,000 words, just to put a simple 4-page website listing of government services. So I guess why don't you trust public servants to use their judgment and exercise their creativity and innovation, but you would trust consulting companies to do both?
First, I would really like to state the fact that the public service has the talent, has expertise. We have just been through difficult times and they have delivered. I cannot start saying how we can complement the work the public service is doing to make sure that we drive and we make sure that we deliver our very ambitious agenda.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Genuis, please.
Thank you. Minister, McKinsey worked for Purdue Pharma for 15 years. In the course of that time, McKinsey provided advice to Purdue Pharma on how to turbocharge the opioid crisis. That advice included offering bonuses to pharmacists for overdoses. McKinsey had to pay over $500 million in compensation in the United States for that. They've paid no compensation thus far in Canada. They have also done work for Russian and Chinese state-owned companies, including ones under sanctions. I've asked you this several times. You haven't answered it. I will ask you one more time and give you 60 seconds of uninterrupted time to answer. Do you believe that McKinsey is an ethical company? Yes or no? Over to you.
And again, I will respond the same way I have since the beginning. We have an integrity regime since 2015 that was voted by the previous government. We are using and utilizing this integrity regime to make sure that it holds the suppliers accountable for their misconduct. And we know that it encourages also to cooperate with legal authorities and take corrective actions if necessary. Under the integrity regime, a supplier that has, as you know, in the past 3 years, been convicted with an offense listed in the ineligibility and suspicion policy will be declared ineligible for a period of 10 years. That's what we have in our directive. And at this time, McKinsey is not deemed an eligible supplier under
Thank you, Minister. That's the 60
regime.
seconds. Now, I think it's pretty clear that you did not answer the question about whether you think McKinsey is an ethical company. We have to evaluate here whether this integrity regime you're talking about is actually working. I would put it to you that if a company like McKinsey, with all they've done, fueling the opioid crisis, advising Chinese and Russian state-affiliated companies, if they pass your integrity regime, then we have a problem with the integrity regime. Right. Do you think that the integrity regime, as it presently exists, is working well? Yes or no?
I believe that the integrity regime that was put in place by the previous government and continued with this government, if we want to look at it again, that is something we might want to recommend in your committee's report.
In your view, though, is it working well?
I would inform you that Minister Jacek is the one responsible for the regime, and she would be
Minister, you're a minister of the Crown. I'm asking you to have opinions on these things, not just tell me what the law says. In your opinion, is an integrity regime that allows a company like McKinsey to be approved, is that a functioning integrity regime, in your considered opinion?
My considered opinion is the fact that we will be reviewing the integrity regime as we are going through many reviews right now to make sure that the government is accountable for the work that we're doing.
Is that part of your review, the quality of the integrity regime?
Well, I understand that we are currently, Minister Jacek is best placed, of course, to ask directly. I understand that we are always reviewing the policies.
So there's no specific review going on the integrity regime? I
can tell you that there are some work being done to make sure that we have a strong integrity regime in place.
Okay. So you won't tell me if you think McKinsey is an ethical company, and you are not prepared to say whether or not the integrity regime is working. It seems to me it's just fairly obvious. Like, this is a company that advised paying bonuses to pharmacists on the basis of overdoses. I don't think it takes a moral philosopher to understand that that's wrong, that that's unethical.
I would like to come back to the fact that as the president of the Treasury Board, there is a directive for procurement.
It sounds like you're
management.
just here to follow processes and instructions, not here to actually evaluate the ethics and morality of this company. Do you think you have a responsibility as a minister of the Crown to make ethical and moral judgments, or do you think you just have a responsibility to implement existing policy frameworks?
I have to tell you, I have a responsibility to make sure that we have the right directives in place. We have
right. So are the existing directives working then?
Currently, as we know, I've been asked to review the current directive on procurement management, and we will do that. I understand that we have some different some views letters that were sent to departments to make sure that we can receive that information.
Here we go again into the process. Can I ask just one more unrelated question, Minister? You've talked about how the growth in contracting out has been proportionate to the growth in the public service. The reality is, though, we have seen both dramatic growth in the public service and dramatic growth in contracting out and a decline in the quality of services. In a way, you'd think those things would be inversely related. If you saw more public servants, you'd see less contracting out and vice versa. But you're presiding over dramatic growth in spending in all areas as well as a decline in the quality of services. So how do you justify that there is dramatic growth in the public service and in contracting out and a decline in services at the same time?
Well, as you know, our government has set a very ambitious agenda in infrastructure, in protecting the environment with our climate change being real. We also are making sure that...
Minister, sorry, my question's not about climate change, it's about quality of service.
We're already past time. If you could just wrap up real briefly, Minister.
I've wrapped up.
Great, thanks. Mr. Kuzmierczak, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much, Madam President, for your excellent responses to some tough questioning. I wanted to allow you the opportunity to again respond to an earlier question about you were describing the integrity regime, and specifically as the integrity regime related to addressing companies that had conducted or had been found guilty of wrongdoing abroad, and you were beginning to sort of talk about the integrity regime that is currently in place, and also how it relates to Mackenzie being ineligible for contracts or being eligible for contracts, and I'm wondering if you might be able to just repeat that response again that you were providing for the committee, but that you were interrupted multiple egregious times as you were trying to provide that response.
Well, thank you for that. And I think I've been pretty clear that since 2015, actually, the previous government introduced a regime to ensure that the government does business only with ethical suppliers in Canada and abroad. And PSPC is the one that runs the regime on behalf of the government. And I believe Minister Jacek did have a chance to share her views and approach on Monday. PSPC determines whether a supplier is ineligible to do business with the government. And as I said earlier, some offenses lead to automatic ineligibility, while others lead to a case-by-case review. And just for everybody that knows, this is applied for procurements that are over $10,000. It is also applied across government, the integrity regime, and through agreements between PSPC and other federal departments and agencies. And there's three parts. I can surely, Minister Jacek shared that with you, but the three parts are ineligibility and suspension policy, integrity directives, integrity provisions, and there is currently some, of course, work that is done to make sure that that integrity regime is updated. And I believe Minister Jacek will probably bring forward some views about enhancing or strengthening the integrity regime. I hope that answers your question.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much, Madam President. And what I wanted to ask is to our TBS officials. We've seen since 2015, we've seen 60,000 full-time employees hired for the public service, 60,000 since 2015. And we've invested an additional $20 billion into our public service since 2015. I know that one of my colleagues likes to paint the picture that we are investing in consultants to the detriment of investments in the public service, but I would say that the numbers show that it's quite opposite. Again, hiring 60,000 full-time employees in the public service, $20 billion additional spend since 2015. So my question to the officials is, some are suggesting that outsourcing is out of control. And what do the numbers show from your vantage point?
I'll speak to that from a technology perspective, and I think your point around that there has been investment in the public service resonates with me for sure. Part of what we're focused on from a digital government perspective is ensuring that the tools that we provide all public servants are modern and that we provide the opportunity for Canadians to be able to use and service themselves as they see fit. So in a digital way, passports being an example this summer where we'd like to provide a more digital experience end-to-end for Canadians. And so the numbers that you share resonate. We also can't tackle, certainly in the technology space, the amount of work without having some augmentation. I'll leave my comments there.
Great. That would be our time, Mr. Kusmirchuk. Thanks very much. I am just going to, if you don't mind, Minister, thanks for being with us. I have a couple questions, please, just for Mr. Hoope, if my colleagues do not mind. Mr. Hoope, you held a meeting last Thursday with the CFOs.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you advise the CFOs, and I'm going to be quoting, be careful what you write down. It will find its way out through an ATEP. Did you say that?
I said that, what I said actually is that indeed, I caution people that we need to remain as public servants very factual in what we say. Okay. So writing personal opinions on different subjects in emails is not necessarily the place to do that. So
Did
again,
you say the words, be careful what you write down?
Be careful what you write down, absolutely.
Okay. Do you not think that violates the intent or the spirit of the Access to Information Act, advising senior public officials not to write things down for fear it will show up in an ATIP?
Absolutely not. I've
don't
said
believe
that they need
that's
to
a violation
remain.
of the spirit?
What I've said is that they need to remain very factual. So they have to be careful
Did you
in
use
what
the
they write
words,
down.
be careful what you write down? It will find its way out through an ATIP.
I don't remember exactly what I've said, to be honest with you, but I did caution people that as we're dealing with sensitive situations, that you need to remain very factual.
Okay. I am greatly worried, as the Information Commissioner states, that there's a culture of secrecy, and it appears that you are leading toward that. Today you sent out an email to deputy heads, CFOs, and the chief audit executives. I'm just going to ask you if you'll share with the committee. You said that February 15th, every department and agency is required to submit the information attached in an Excel spreadsheet. Whereas contracts with McKinsey, whereas contracting authority you mentioned the 15th. Will you share that with this committee, please, as part of our study?
Yeah, so we're asking, I think the committee's already asking for basically the same type of information from the
I'm
departments.
asking, will you provide this, and can I have the will of the committee or committee approval to ask that you provide us with that Excel document that you've sent out to the CFOs and deputy heads for the 15th. There's an additional one that you've asked for by March 22nd, a former letter to provide to you items on the integrity regime, procurements, and procurements conducted in a consistent manner. I'd like the will of the committee to ask that you provide that as soon as you receive it as well to the committee.
Information that we will receive is necessary for us to conduct a review and analysis that will generate the report that we said we would do by June 30th.
Okay. Colleagues, is it the will of the committee that Mr. Hoope provide those as soon as they're received? Okay. I think I have the will of the committee. Your email that you distributed said February 15th, so we'll expect it to the clerk on the next day. The other document, which is a Word document, by March 22nd. Tomorrow, you are meeting with the chief audit executives on the McKinsey study. Would you provide us with the minutes when they are immediately ready after tomorrow's meeting, after your meeting with the audit executives?
Super. Give us time to write the minutes, but we will definitely do that.
So will the committee that be provided to the committee? Yes. Perfect. Tomorrow being Thursday, so perhaps Friday or Monday, if you could have them sent to our clerk. Thank you very much, witnesses. Ms. Luello, it's nice to see you again, former constituent. And again, let me just express my extreme displeasure over the comments made about perhaps hiding things from access to information and continued secrecy from that level. Thank you, everyone. Unless there's anything else, we will be adjourned. Suspended. I apologize. We are suspending to bring in a new witness. Welcome, Ms. Soudan, to OGGO. Do you have an opening statement for us for 5 minutes?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chers membres du comité.
Dear members of the committee, for more than 75 years, BDC has played a critical role in the Canadian economic landscape, being the only bank exclusively devoted to entrepreneurs. We lend to Canadians SMEs, we advise them, and we invest in them. Our role is one of development, where we act in complementarity with private sector lenders and fill important gaps the market is not able to meet. This is a role that our teams perform with exemplary rigor and efficiency. As a result, far from being a burden for taxpayers, our activities are profitable and have allowed us to pay $1.3 billion in dividends to our shareholder, the Government of Canada, since 2011. Above all, our activities benefit our 95,000 clients who rely on us to grow their business and in the process contribute to the prosperity of the country. The pandemic has been a defining moment in BDC's recent history. Without a significant increase in our workforce and within a demanding context, we supported more than 30,000 new clients. In doing so, the pandemic concretely demonstrated BDC's expertise and the potential to support an even greater number of entrepreneurs. During the summer of 2021, Canada was still facing a tumultuous economic context, and the BDC team felt compelled once again, and this is when I joined BDC. Driven by the ambition to have an even greater impact, we embarked with the members of our board of directors on a strategic review. It was in the context of this exercise that we made the decision to seek the services of a consulting firm. It was clear, both to me and my team, that we held the leadership and full ownership for this reflection. However, we were also convinced that to conduct this exercise with the rigor and scale it deserved, the use of an external firm would prove useful. This process would help us refine and confirm our understanding of the future. It would also provide us with the perspective of other development banks around the world and expose us to best practices. This would equip us with the best possible tools to begin the next phase of implementation, because there was never any doubt that BDC will assume the entire responsibility for the execution of the strategy. Our intention to work with an external firm therefore resulted in the launch of a formal, competitive, and rigorous call for tenders, at the end of which the selection committee made the decision to retain McKinsey. Their work started in 2021 and ended in the summer of 2022. Assessing the value for money of this contract calls for a two-step analysis, short-term and long-term. In the immediate sense, I can tell you that the process has allowed us to adopt a renewed, ambitious, and inspiring strategic vision of what BDC can do for Canada over the next 10 years. The external firm helped us increase our capabilities and carry out the strategic exercise in parallel with our day-to-day operations. It was essential for me that the consultants work in synergy with my colleagues. This approach has enriched our strategic thinking, widened our perspectives, and facilitated meaningful knowledge transfer. Longer term, I have the firm conviction that in a few years, we will look at this exercise the same way we look today at the origin of the success of BDC Capital. Developed 11 years ago with the aid of consultants, this ambitious strategy has enabled BDC Capital to play a leading role in growing the Canadian venture capital market from $1 billion in 2009 to nearly $15 billion in 2021. That contract was assuredly a good investment for BDC and for the Canadian economy. It is obviously too early to reach similar conclusions regarding the contract that has just ended. But I can assure you of one thing: bringing to life the ambitions of our strategic vision and the full realization of our mandate as a development bank are at the heart of all the decisions we make. I will be pleased to answer your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hudon. Mr. Barrett Mr. Paul Hoos, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Ms. Hudon. I'll go directly to my first question. Before joining BDC, did you have personal relationships, knowledge of McKinsey, people that worked there? No? You mentioned the board of directors and that the board decided to go outside to a consulting company to look at strategy. I said that the board of directors supported the idea of a strategic review and also supported the idea of an outside consultant being involved. Did you discuss this? Yes, we discussed this. When I joined the organization, the team had just gone through 18 months of pandemic, and as I indicated in my opening remarks, the team had to continue to, well, you're talking about a team. People inside your organization, were they happy about dealing with McKinsey? I understand they may not have been, but you're saying that the board of directors wanted this, and you talked about a selection committee. Well, regarding your first comment about some disagreement, I have heard that as well, but I do want to say that since my arrival, we have worked on engagement with our employees, and we have an 86% engagement by employees. We've raised that to 88%. And of course, there are always some people who do not agree. But the idea has been was supported to launch a bidding process, and that was supported. And you're talking about the call for tenders? No, I'm talking about the strategic review. My 7 members of the team, of the leadership team, can you share the names of those people? Michel Bergeron, Stéphane, Pierre, Gant, Maud, from procurement, and Anouk. So those people, are they on the board of directors or in the executive? They were either executive members or senior managers. So the call for tenders was open and transparent. Were there specific criteria that might have favored McKinsey? We always use the same evaluation grid for contracting, and nothing was changed to help one firm or another. So you are saying that there was no favoritism and there was no contact from the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister's office directing you? In the process that led to the choice and created frustration internally, was who expressed those frustrations? Who was frustrated about McKinsey? There was no one who came to me with frustrations. Well, there were people that went to the media that felt that it was the wrong choice. I can say that it was anonymous comments. So you mentioned the 7 people on the selection committee, and they supported this process. Is that what you're saying? Very well. In your opinion, the question right now is about the government dealing with McKinsey, and that there is influence on a number of strategies and directions. And now you are with the bank, and there was frustration expressed because there was no ability to do this inside. Why did you have to go outside for a strategic review? Well, the decision was the right one to go outside for this at that time, because we wanted to have expertise from outside that would add to our internal capacity. And it was the right decision at that time, especially because we were just starting to move out of the pandemic era, and the economy was turbulent. We wanted to have a good understanding of the future for SMEs in Canada. Just a short question. Do you know Dominic Barton personally? I met him first in 2018. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul Hoos. Mr. Baines for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Ms. Houdon for joining us today. January 2023 article in CBC News explains that the Business Development Bank of Canada awarded a competitive contract for $2.8 million plus a $2.1 million extension to McKinsey as part of a strategic review process. What were the goals of this strategic review?
Thank you. The goal of the strategic review was to help us, or not help us, but for us to be able to understand what the future would be for our SMEs in Canada, and especially how a development bank such as BDC could play a greater role to support our SMEs ecosystem. So it was really to go onward and forward and to better understand what we would need to do differently, more or less, to be the real development bank that BDC has been for the last 78 years.
Okay, and were you satisfied with the recommendations?
I am to this day very much satisfied with the process. And I say this because, of course, McKinsey brought some deep understanding of our sector, capacity around analytical skills, but also very much pleased with the process because more than 400 of my colleagues embarked into the journey, along, of course, with the executive team and also with the board of directors. And this is the real success of the review.
And if we were to compare, how was McKinsey's strategic review different from previous ones that were conducted for BDC?
Well, I cannot compare as I joined in 2021, but as I referred in my opening statement, how BDC Capital was able, well, the vision around BDC Capital 11 years ago, this is very much comparable to the quality of what was delivered in 2011. Now the secret is on how you deliver on a strategy. And
you indicated you're quite new. You are the first woman CEO of BDC. How have you been working to support women-led businesses, and what are your goals for the future?
Thank you for this question. I think that I'm known and renowned to be passionate about gender parity and see more women in key roles and having success and reach success. For now, we have a little bit more than 10% of our portfolio that is supporting underserved clienteles and including women. You've probably have seen in the last year that we've announced a Thrive platform. It's $500 million totally dedicated to women entrepreneur, and to be there as a development bank to make a real difference for our women entrepreneur in Canada.
Okay, thank you. And the clean technology sector is also growing and becoming increasingly important, as we all know. How is BDC contributing to the development of the clean technology sector in Canada?
So that's another big success for BDC. BDC launched 5 years ago the first clean tech fund. BDC Capital launched the first clean tech fund, and we've just renewed with a second fund, the climate fund, with $400 million. We're now invested up to $1 billion in the clean tech sector in Canada.
Thank you. And how much time do I have, Mr. Chair? How does BDC determine whether it's going to develop projects in-house or contract them out?
We looked at our capacity internally, and I have to say that when it's up to delivering projects, it's done internally. When we feel that we need to bring extra expertise to the table, that's when we think about bringing consulting firms.
Okay, thank you. Any more time?
You have 53, 52, 51 seconds.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Baines. Mrs. Vinola, please, for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hudon, thank you for being with us tonight, especially with the temperatures that they are talking about. Ms. Hudon, I listened to what you had to say. In your opening remarks, you mentioned that when you arrived, you needed a consulting firm such as McKinsey to be able to develop a plan to be able to better address the needs of SMEs. So what was happening exactly there? Thank you for that question. The exercise of a strategic review was not really intended to address weaknesses, but because really for the last 18 years we were meeting the needs well, but there we were coming out of a pandemic. The whole ecosystem had changed, and we wanted to continue to be a high-performing development bank because that is our role. So we wanted to look ahead and determine what had changed for SMEs, what we needed to do differently, or perhaps in addition to what we had been doing before. So the first thing we needed to do, and this was very important, was to find out how much of a share of the market SMEs really held, because our role is to work with them. We want to work as a complementary type of lender to what is already available. Thank you. I understand that after such an upheaval as the pandemic is brought in, then you might need to have some outside help. But why an outside consultant? Well, because that was a very difficult and transformative thing that happened. So when I think about what I understand is the role of the leader of an organization, it seems to me that part of that role is to determine the future strategy. But when I'm told, well, consultants are specialists in this, there aren't really specialists in that, especially when it came to the pandemic. Maybe it will be historians later that will be the specialists in how much things change. So when we want to know how we compare with other countries, was there no one within the bank that was able to say, well, what we need is to get to that particular goal, to reach that particular level? Do we have that information? Does McKinsey keep the information? Decide who we compare with so that we figure out what we want to do, how we're going to help our SMEs, rather than base that on what the expertise says in-house? Well, a lot of the knowledge that went into the strategic review came from our in-house expertise. We weren't looking at what the pandemic had done, but really looking at comparables internationally to see what other development banks were doing. We also wanted to add capacity to our team so that we could understand the issues well, to see where we could do better and more for our SMEs. Can you remind me quickly when you joined the BDC? 2021. How many people are there? How many people from McKinsey were involved? Only one person, Véronique Doval. She was hired less than 6 months ago. So the contract for McKinsey, I just want to say she left McKinsey 9 years ago. So when was the contract awarded to McKinsey? It was signed at the end of August 2021. What would be the definition? How would you define the alumni of McKinsey? Well, it's people that stay in touch with McKinsey even after they're out of it. Yes, regardless of the amount of time. Would Véronique Dorval be considered in that?
Sorry, I'm having issues here with my mic. You had about an extra 15 seconds, Mrs. Manola. Mr. Johns, before we go to you, because we finished a bit late last meeting, we cut both the block and the NDP off at 1 minute instead of the 2.5 in the second round. We have the capacity to probably go a tiny bit longer. So instead of doing a 3 minute, 3 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, do we have the committee's permission? We'll stick with 5 minute, 5 minute, 2.5, 2.5 for the final round? Yes. Great, thanks. Go ahead for your 6 minutes, please, Mr. Johns.
Thank you very much. Ms. Udon, the media reported that, quote, employment turnover in upper management had spiked, and that it could have a lot to do with the fact that current and former BDC employees were expressing serious concern with your decision to outsource the strategic review, the $4.9 million strategic review. They say McKinsey had unrealistic expectations and that bringing in outside consultants showed a lack of confidence in internal expertise. Now, the BDC has done similar strategic views. Why couldn't this one be done internally? And do you think like $4.9 million, you couldn't have hired in-house expertise to have done that work?
It was well discussed, well thought, and it was not my decision. It was a decision that was taken both with the executive team and the board of directors to bring external consultant, not to develop the strategy, but to help and to support and to contribute to the vision.
Okay, again, I'm just going to go back to the impact that had on staff, that that they cited that there was unrealistic expectations and it lacked a confidence in internal expertise. I'm going to go to some expenses. The employees at BDC also reported that they're alarmed at some of the expenses that incurred by the BDC under your leadership. You flew your private chauffeur from Montreal to BC at a cost of $12,300 last June. And again, $8,100 last October. That's $20,400. Just so you understand, I live in the farthest riding to the west. I travel back and forth across this country, and it takes me 11 hours to get home. 2 flights and a long drive. My costs of travel in the last reported full year of 2018-2019, $25,000. Do you not see a problem with that? You were quoted best value for money. Do you stand by that statement? Because I've never, ever incurred a travel cost like that in my 7.5 years as a member of Parliament.
Thank you for your question. This decision was a decision that we took for specific reasons at the time. I hope that, and I'm in front of you saying that I hope that we will not have to take this decision again, and we will find other options, I promise.
I have to be accountable to taxpayers. Mm-hmm. I believe that employees and leadership in Crown corporations have to do the same. It is prudent. Now, we had a motion that I brought forward to the committee, and I'm going to move to committee business real quick here, if you don't mind. I brought forward a motion. I've talked to everybody. I feel confident that it wouldn't have passed as it stood. So if I withdraw that motion and present what we talked about, I'm hoping the committee will support that. So, Mr. Chair, sorry, if you don't mind, could I move that I withdraw the initial motion to expand the study on McKinsey so we can finish that study, and that I move.
Sure. Just on that one, we just need unanimous consent to withdraw it, and I assume we do. Yes. Perfect.
Thank you so much, everybody, and on the committee. And I move that the committee expand its study on the outsourcing of contracts in public services and procurement by increasing the number of meetings in the motion adopted February 1st, 2022 to a minimum of 12 meetings, that the committee invite the most senior executives in Canada from McKinsey & Company, Deloitte, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Accenture, KPMG, and Ernst & Young, and that the committee invite additional witnesses to provide testimony, provided the parties each provide their list of additional witnesses to the clerk of the committee by 3 p.m. Eastern Time on February 14th, Valentine's Day, 2023, who the chair shall schedule in a manner that is fair to all parties.
What a romantic Valentine's Day you have planned for OGGO, Mr.
We don't have to
Johns.
put that in the motion, Mr. Chair.
Just put,
Mr. Genuis, then Mr.
just a point of order. If I understand right, this is a notice of motion, right? Because it can't be moved without notice, but it's a notice of motion,
It can
right?
be moved.
It's a matter at hand, so I think it is
It's a matter at
acceptable.
hand, and I believe that's what I heard from the committee the last meeting, that there wasn't going to be an objection to this.
Okay. I was just trying to understand. I wasn't.
It's a matter at hand.
Mr. Jory?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fundamentally don't have an issue with that, but my understanding is that we're coming to a committee business portion of our scheduling very soon, and can we delay the final decision until then? But from what I'm hearing is that there's very much aligned. My only concern is I really need to go back and get an understanding of what does this do to the production of documents. We just received over 50,000 pages for McKinsey, and some of the dates and some of the volume that's going to be potentially generates. I just want to make sure that we have enough time to go through translation, and then we don't run into an issue.
Yeah, I understand. I think Mr. Johns has a brief answer for that.
Part of the reason why I didn't include it in the McKinsey study. So we're not going to be, asking public servants to spend 8 years on documents. That's my understanding it was going to take.
So there's no document
there is no
request.
documents. So hopefully that relieves your concern.
Mrs. Vinola?
Just to be very clear, we're talking about finishing the McKinsey study, and then we would start the study on the other consulting firm. Is that correct? Yes.
Mr. Genuis?
Thank you, Chair. So, from what I understand, we haven't seen the text of this in advance. We're inclined to be supportive in principle. We have very limited time with the head of BDC, and I would like to have the additional round that we agreed to. So, on that basis, I would move to adjourn debate.
Okay, we have motion to adjourn debate. Sorry. Yeah, no, I know. It's not debatable. Show of hands. Start with- Yeah. Looks like the numbers say that we're going to adjourn debate on this. Sorry. I do, though, sense the will of the committee that we can take this up again when we have a bit more time. And then I'm going to guess, my experience with the committee, that it will probably go ahead, Mr. Johns. But just, it appears we want to finish this off. But I think we could probably bring it back in on Monday, where I'm sure we will have it properly approved, if I was going to guess. Did you want to finish your round, with Ms. Hudon, Mr. Johns? You have.
Other people's time?
No, the clerk has advised me when he moves his motion, he had 2 minutes left, so I let him finish the 2 minutes. If you could just be brief, because then we're cutting into the last motion now.
Be really quick then. Another instance of spending, and I'm going to go back to this issue because it's a real concern. There was a $320,000 employee outreach event And the media reported that employees said they have no idea what the point of the pricey event was. You know, I'm intrigued by two expenses in there that make up most of the cost. $145,000 spent on script writing and video production. Another $146,000 was spent on audiovisual services. That $146,000 was awarded without competition. The BDC is required to issue tender calls for contracts over $150,000. Curiously, the audiovisual spending was just $4,000 short of that limit. So my question to you is, what was the point of that event? And my second question is, were the two greatest expenses intentionally billed at $4,000 and $5,000 short of the competition threshold? Was this done to avoid having to issue bids?
So on the purpose of the meeting, as it is part of the BDC culture to bring all employees together this time around after 18 months of pandemic working from home, and even more than 18 months, almost 2 years, we decided to organize an event where we would bring employees together physically across our offices across Canada and virtually with a interactive platform. So the cost related to this event was to create that
But you didn't go to tender. You bid. You put it. You build out just below the tender, like really, really close. Why so close? Did you try to avoid going external and putting out a bid, or did you just select?
No, that would not be aligned to how we do things.
It looks like it's sole sourced. It really does, in a sense.
I hear you, but it's not part of how we do things at BDC.
I'm afraid that is our time now. Is it Mr. Paul Hoos for 5 or Mr. Barrett? Mr. Barrett for 5, please.
Well, thanks, Chair. Thank you for coming today. A couple questions about the value for money that Canadians get from the BDC as a Crown corporation. And first, for context, I'll just ask, do you know what the average price for groceries is for a family in Canada this year? Do you know what that's projected to be?
Said?
Yes. Do you know what
on a weekly basis?
Well, for a year, what would it cost an average family in a year?
Well, I would say 150 per week or 200 per week by 52.
Okay, so it's said to be $16,000 for this year for a Canadian family, and while they're looking at this record high in food inflation, they're seeing things like exorbitant amounts of money, $104 million paid in bonuses and raises over the last 2 years. They're seeing things like these fees for chauffeurs to be flown across the country. They're seeing these wild event planning expenses that they don't really see value for, and their employees. Your employees have reflected that in some of their comments. How would you justify spending half a year's worth of groceries on that? The lowest amount that I've mentioned, flying your driver across the country. How would you justify that to Canadians?
Especially the event organized for employees, we felt that it was the right moment to invest, to bring our colleagues together first.
And I've heard your answer about that. I've heard your answer about that. Mm-hmm. But specifically, in the context of what groceries cost a Canadian family in a year and the necessity to have the best value for money to fly your driver across the country, is that justifiable to Canadians?
Well, again, this was a decision that was taken in a very serious manner for specific reasons. And as I answered to your colleague, we are highly responsible. And I'm in front of you saying that it's my hope that we will not do this again.
I would say that it's the expectation of most Canadians who are familiar with it that it not happen again.
I hear you.
So BDC is Business Development Bank of Canada, correct?
Yes.
And BDC are experts in business development. Is that correct?
We have part of the team that will do business development, and especially our teams in the field working directly with clients.
So why did you need a $2.1 million contract for a business development case for an organization that bills itself as as one that offers business development expertise?
Well, what we did during this strategic review was not necessarily to think about the go-to-market strategy for specific clients, but what did the pandemic change over 2 years and for the future of the SMEs ecosystem in Canada. So it was not specifically around business development, but it was to identify what would be the key pillars on which and in which we would invest.
Okay, I have just under a minute left. So you'll have seen in media reporting stories about McKinsey, the company, their involvement in advising Purdue Pharma to supercharge the opioid, the opioid crisis, their involvement in scandals, in corruption scandals in South Africa and France, their involvement with helping the government of Saudi Arabia track down and punish dissidents, and to name only a few. Knowing that now, going forward, do you view McKinsey as an ethical company? Will you continue to do business? The BDC, will they continue to do business with McKinsey now knowing these facts?
Going forward, as we did in the past, we will respect carefully the process around procurement with the rules we have.
Is McKinsey an ethical company, ma'am?
Again, I'm in front of you to say that we've respected the process, the procurement process with all
I'm not asking
rules.
about the procurement process. I'm asking you personally, ma'am, if you think, as someone who's here to be accountable to Canadians, if McKinsey is an ethical company. It's a yes or no question.
I will say again that I'm in front of you to say that we
You're here
did
to, respectfully,
respect-
ma'am, you're here to answer questions.
Yeah. If we could just have a very quick question, then we'll finish up and go to Mr. Shawari.
It's a super quick question. Is McKinsey ethical, yes or no?
Again, we've respected our procurement process, and we will continue to do so.
I would say if you continue to do business with them, your procurement process is broken.
Thank you. Mr. Shawari, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Houdon, for joining us today. So I understand this was a competitive process, and McKinsey was selected, and the process was in a strategic review based on the challenges that small businesses faced in the previous 2 years, and also it was a process that engaged over 400 members of your organization. And one of the key perspectives that McKinsey seems to have been qualified was around what other development banks in the world were doing. Is my understanding correct? Okay, thank you. So having said that, can you tell us what other leading thoughts or thought leadership that McKinsey brought that addressed some of the challenges that the small businesses face, especially the ones that they're part of the startup and they're trying to grow in a very challenging environment?
Few comments. So first, we've looked at how we could accelerate the adoption of digital, both from the bank perspective, but also from the SMEs perspective. Second, one of the very important output of this strategic review, and it was done both by McKinsey and the team internally, was to better understand, both from a numbers perspective, but also a qualitative perspective, what was the market share that was up for BDC to serve more and better. it was helpful to take quality time to understand from the 1.2 million SMEs in Canada, which of those are to be served and supported by BDC. We were able to quantify this total addressable market for BDC, but also we were able to qualify those clients that today are not receiving the support they should from other financial institutions. And it brought us to conclude that if we have started over 10 and 15 years to support some underserved clients, we need to accelerate this, and especially to support more women entrepreneurs, Indigenous entrepreneurs, Black communities entrepreneurs, newcomers entrepreneurs, to name only a few. And I will say that this was often discussed internally at the bank, and one thing that my new colleagues shared with me when I joined in 21 was we would like to keep on being a bank, but to put a capital D to BDC so that we fully play our role of a development bank. And this was a very important outcome of the strategic review. And we were able to get there both from a number and qualitative aspect because of the combination of the know-how internally and the expertise we brought with McKinsey.
Thank you. Thank you. It's clear that the areas of focus for the bank is the area are very much aligned with the areas area of vulnerability and also opportunity that we saw during the pandemic as it relates to the small businesses and where would allow us to grow, such as Black entrepreneurs, such as women-led organizations, such as Indigenous organization. Now, with about 40 seconds to go, I wanted to talk about the structure. Was there any recommendation around the skills, the existing skill set, any gap that's within BDC that this transformation needs to address to ensure that the market that you talked about, 1.2 million small businesses, that could be served better?
Did not address this specifically around skills, but we did recognize, and we do recognize today, for example, to serve those underserved clientele, we need to bring more of those talents internally so that we learn from them and that we know how to work and support those clientele, but it was not specifically addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Vinola for 2.5, and then Mr. Johns for 2.5, please.
The plan that McKinsey proposed to you was provided some objectives and how they would be achieved. Is that right? Thank you. The strategic vision that came out of the reflection gave us specifics about where we should do better and do more. Do you agree with the detailed recommendations? Yes, because it was our strategic reflection. It was the executive team that went before the board of directors, the team supported by 400 employees internally. It wasn't McKinsey that wrote up the strategic vision. Is it possible to see the plan that was suggested, or is it redacted? My colleagues confirmed that we will be complying fully with the committee to provide all the documents, including the documents that were prepared under that contract. So the plan that was produced by McKinsey and what was provided to the teams, is it the same documents, or does one have the McKinsey stamp on it? No, It's a BDC document that includes information that was provided by McKinsey. And so it's BDC's name that's on there. Thank you. We know that Dominic Barton was an ambassador, and we've had your role. We know that we have the infrastructure bank, and he was involved in that. And we know that McKinsey tends to be involved in all of those things. So should we worry about that? No. Well, you find that having McKinsey alumni involved in all those areas? Thank you.
Response, maybe you can provide in writing. Mr. Johns for 2.5, please.
Mr. Don, the BDC hired 4 of your former colleagues. All 4 worked at Sun Life during your time there between 2010 and 2017. According to a BDC spokesperson, you had a role in at least 2 of those hires. For the 2 that you hired with your involvement, what positions did they have at Sun Life, and what positions were they given at BDC?
So my involvement was being one of the interviewer. So I was not responsible for the hire, but I was one of the person that interviewed those 2 candidates.
Okay.
Because first,
but you're heading an organization. You don't think you have an influence?
Yes, I agree, but I wanted to clarify the reasons why I was involved in interviewing those 2 persons. One was to report to me directly, and the second was reporting to one of my direct report.
Okay. So given your current job, you've chosen to hire former coworkers. How can we trust that, your decision to choose like your coworkers and that you're going to not choose your former employers to get contracts or your former colleagues or people you worked alongside that are working for some of these big consulting companies?
So first, it was a process. Well done. It was the roles were posted for the 2 roles. Headhunters were managing those processes, and again, along with my colleagues that interviewed those candidates, we took the decision as a team that those 2 candidates were the best one to hire.
Have you chosen your former employers? Like, have they been given any contracts with BDC?
My former employee?
Yeah. Sun Life or any of the organizations, have you used them for any contracts or have you given contracts out to anybody that you worked with that is working for another company? Have you, outsourcing any of the services that you've gotten that maybe even don't meet the threshold? Is there any?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
That would be your time, Mr. Johns. Colleagues, thanks for bearing with us and staying a bit later. Ms. Hudon, thank you for joining us today. If there's nothing else, this time we will be adjourned. Thank you, everyone.